This story is titled, My Relatives Celebrated Too Early. Elder's fortune went to his most devoted caregiver. Me, not them. Hey everyone, I'm Andrew, 27 years old and living in Portland, Oregon. For as long as I can remember, I've been the black sheep of my family. Not because I'm struggling, I'm actually doing pretty well for myself, but because I've never fit their narrow definition of success. My dad, Richard, is some hotshot corporate lawyer who acts like the entire world revolves around lawsuits and contracts. Mom, Patricia, used to be a cardiology nurse before retiring, and now she obsesses about keeping up appearances like it's her full-time job or something. Then there are my siblings. My brother Marcus owns 3 CrossFit gyms and won't shut up about how he's revolutionizing fitness in the state. My other brother Daniel runs some fancy tech startup and is always talking about how he's going to be the next big thing. My sister Rachel married into money. Her husband Christopher is some big shot real estate developer. They spam social media with their perfect suburban life photos, always with captions like blessed and living the dream. And then there's me. I'm a professional welder and part-time hunting guide, and I love every minute of my work. Welding is literally an art form that takes real skill and precision. I've built myself a solid career and make great money too. The hunting guide thing isn't even about cash. I just love being outdoors and sharing my passion with others. Try explaining that to my family, though. I might as well be speaking Chinese. Mom always asks when I'm going to stop playing with metal and get a real job instead, like I'm some kid messing around in a garage. Marcus keeps trying to get me to manage one of his gyms, saying I need to do something meaningful with my life. Daniel treats me like I'm some caveman. You should get into tech, Andrew. That's where the real future is. Real future my ass. My bank account would disagree. I stopped trying to explain myself to them years ago. What's even the point anymore? They've made up their minds about me, and honestly, I don't care enough to change their opinion. They can keep their judgmental attitudes. I'm happy with my life, and successful in my own way. I don't need their approval to validate my existence. The only person who ever truly understood me was my great-uncle Robert. He was my grandfather's brother, and nothing like the rest of our stuck-up family. Robert lived life exactly how he wanted, and didn't give a damn about fancy titles or degrees. He only cared about a person's character. Robert used to be a corporate lawyer too back in the day, but he was different. He gave it all up to live off the land and built himself an amazing hunting cabin with 85 acres of pristine wilderness, all to himself up in the mountains near Mount Hood. Robert and I bonded over hunting and fishing. He taught me everything I know: how to track animals, how to shoot properly, and most importantly, how to respect nature. He never looked down on me for being a welder. He actually respected my trade. It's honest work, he would always say. Someone who can create with their hands will never go hungry. When Robert got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer last winter, it hit me like a truck. He was always so full of life. I couldn't imagine him being sick, let alone dying. My family's reaction was absolutely disgusting. Well, he's lived a long life, Rachel said, like that made it okay to abandon him. Nobody offered to help. Nobody even visited. They were all too busy with their precious careers, too important to care about a dying old man. I couldn't stand seeing Robert alone like that. I started visiting him every chance I got, helping around the house, cooking his meals, and just keeping him company. I had to cut back on work hours to make it happen, but Robert was family. Real family takes care of each other. At least that's what I believe. Meanwhile, the rest of them lived their lives like Robert didn't even exist. Rachel and Christopher were planning their fancy European vacation. Marcus was opening yet another gym. Daniel was buried in his precious app development. My parents didn't even pretend to care anymore. Mom would sometimes ask, "How's Robert doing?" But only because she felt obligated, not because she actually gave a damn. I didn't mind their indifference, though. It just made me want to do more for Robert. He deserved better than being forgotten by the people he had spent his whole life caring about. One evening, after helping Robert with dinner, he looked at me with a serious expression. "Is this hurting you, Andrew?" he asked. "Taking care of me, I mean." I told him straight up. "Had to cut back on work a bit, but it's fine. You're family, Robert. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to be." He just nodded. I could tell he was thinking hard about something. You've got a good heart, kid, he said. Don't ever let them take that away from you. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would find out soon enough. After that, everything started showing its true colors. Robert was getting weaker every day. I could see his time running out. I spent my days making sure he ate, giving him his meds, and just being there to talk. Meanwhile, my family was nowhere to be found. To them, Robert might as well have been already dead. They acted like his existence was just an inconvenience. I'm sure Andrew's got it handled, Rachel said when I asked if she'd visit for his birthday. His 78th birthday. Daniel didn't even reply to the group text. Marcus's response was pure bullshit. Man, I'd love to, but I'm swamped with the gym opening. They weren't swamped. They were just selfish pricks. Robert never complained, though. He was one of those people who hates burdening others, even when he needed help. But I could see the hurt in his eyes every time I mentioned someone from the family. They're busy, he'd say, trying to make excuses for them. Busy my ass, more like too self-absorbed to care. One evening after cleaning up dinner, Robert asked me to sit down. He looked serious again, like he'd been thinking about something heavy. Andrew, I've been meaning to ask you something, he began. Taking care of me like this, how much is it costing you? I just shrugged it off. Working fewer hours, but it's fine. Least I can do. He nodded, but didn't look convinced. You've got a good heart, kid. Always have. Just don't want you to end up regretting this. Regret what? I asked, genuinely confused. Putting so much into helping me, he explained. Rest of them wouldn't lift a finger. Don't want you to feel cheated because you're the only one who cares. That hit hard. I had never thought about it that way. I wasn't expecting anything from Robert. I was doing this because I loved him, not for some reward. I don't feel cheated, I told him. If anything, I'm grateful. Grateful I get to spend this time with you. They're the ones who'll regret it. He just smiled and nodded after that. A week later, Robert dropped some big news. I was at his place helping him sort through old papers, a lifetime collection of stuff. Hunting licenses, photos, mementos from his lawyer days. He asked me to grab a specific envelope from his desk drawer. I handed it to him, and he held it for a moment, looking all serious. Andrew, I've changed my will, he said. I thought he meant he was adding some wildlife charity. He was always talking about that, always wanted to support conservation groups and veteran organizations. But then he looked me right in the eyes. I want you to have the cabin and $200,000 to fix it up. Rest is going to charity. I just sat there staring at him. Why? Because you've done more for me than anyone else, he said straight up. You've been here day in and day out, while the rest of them couldn't even bother to call. You're the only one who truly cares, Andrew. I want you to have a real start in life, a chance to build something that's yours. I didn't even know what to say. Part of me wanted to protest, tell him he didn't have to do this. But I could see how serious he was, and I didn't want to disrespect his wishes. Robert, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, he replied. Just promise you'll take care of the place, make it your own, and don't let them take it from you. It didn't take long for my family to start sniffing around. They didn't know about the will yet, but they could sense something was up. Marcus called me one evening. Weird because he never calls unless he wants something. Hey, Andrew, he said, all casual like we talk every day. So how's Robert doing? He's hanging in there, I replied, keeping it short. Cool, cool, like we were discussing the weather. Hey, I was thinking, once Robert, passes, what's going to happen to the cabin? I nearly laughed out loud. The man couldn't even wait for Robert to die before trying to stake his claim. Not sure, I said, playing dumb. Why? Oh, no reason, he tried to sound casual. Just thought it'd be cool to keep it in the family. Maybe we could all chip in and fix it up. By chip in, he meant me doing all the work. Yeah, maybe, I just said it to shut him up. The next day, Rachel texted me. Hey, Andrew, I was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if we turned Robert's cabin into a family retreat? The kids would love it. First of all, Rachel doesn't even have kids yet. Second, she hasn't been to the cabin in years. The last time she visited, she complained about the bugs and said the place smelled like old wood. Now suddenly it's her dream vacation spot? I didn't even bother responding. Their entitlement only got worse. Daniel, who hasn't spoken to Robert in forever, started dropping hints in the family group chat about how much land like Robert's is worth. Prime real estate, he said, could easily sell for $1 million if developed right. I wanted to scream. These people didn't care about Robert, his wishes, or his legacy. They only saw dollar signs. Meanwhile, Robert kept declining. He was more tired every day. Some days he couldn't even leave his bed, but he never lost his sharp mind. One evening, while helping with his meds, he looked at me knowingly. "You know they're going to come after you, right?" I just nodded. "Let them try." Robert grinned. "That's my boy." Robert was right. I knew they'd come for me eventually. I wasn't worried, though. I'd made peace with not being their idea of successful. Now, thanks to Robert, I had something they couldn't take, no matter how hard they tried. Little did I know how far they'd go. By this point, Robert was in his final weeks. I was with him almost every day, helping him through the worst of it, while my family couldn't even send a card. The only time they mentioned Robert was to speculate about his estate. I should have known something was up when Marcus suggested a family dinner. For context, we never did family dinners anymore. We barely saw each other except on holidays, and even then everyone left right after dessert. But Marcus was weirdly insistent, so I agreed to go just out of curiosity. The moment I walked into my parents' house, I could feel the tension. Everyone was there. Marcus, Daniel, Rachel, and all their spouses too. They all had this fake, polite vibe going. Mom greeted me with a forced smile that looked physically painful for her. "Andrew, you made it," she said, like I was some long-lost son returning home. "Yeah, what's this about?" I skipped the small talk. Marcus slapped my back. "Just thought it'd be nice to get together, talk about Robert." Red flag number 1. The first 10 minutes was awkward small talk, work stuff, vacation plans, whatever new bullshit Daniel's tech company was doing. Then Rachel decided to cut to the chase. She put on her fake concerned sister voice. "So, Andrew, what's Robert's plan for the cabin? You've been spending so much time with him. Figured you'd know." Red flag number 2. I just shrugged. "He hasn't really said." Marcus jumped in. "Well, it makes sense to keep it in the family. Maybe use it as a vacation spot, like a family retreat." Rachel's eyes lit up. "Yeah," she said. I was telling Christopher, the kids would love it. They could grow up surrounded by nature. Would be such a great legacy for Robert. "Your kids aren't even born yet." I couldn't help myself. Rachel glared at me. Before she could respond, Daniel jumped in. "Honestly, I think we should sell it. That land is worth a fortune. We could split the money, invest in something worthwhile." "Split it?" Marcus scoffed. "Why would we split it when I've got a business that could actually use it?" Robert would have wanted it to go towards something meaningful. Meaningful like expanding your gym empire? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were fighting over the cabin like Robert was already dead. "I don't think Robert would want it sold." I tried to steer the conversation away from their greed. Marcus leaned back, smirking like an asshole. "Come on, Andrew, what are you going to do with it? Weld up a hunting blind? Let's be realistic here." I wanted to punch his smug face. Instead, I just said, "Robert hasn't made any decisions yet. You should probably talk to him if you're so interested." After that dinner, their entitlement went into overdrive. Marcus started calling almost daily, always with some new scheme for the cabin. "Andrew, I've been thinking," he'd start. "What if we turn the cabin into a rental property? Could make a killing during hunting season." I'd handle all the logistics, of course. "You could do the repairs since you're so handy." Translation: he'd profit while I did all the work. Then Rachel sent me a text. "Andrew, we really need to talk about Robert's estate. The cabin is too important to let it sit unused. Call me ASAP." When I didn't respond, she followed up with another text. "This isn't just about you, Andrew. It's about the family. Stop being selfish." Selfish? I was the only one taking care of Robert, yet somehow I was the selfish one. A week later, Rachel and Marcus showed up unannounced at Robert's house. I was there helping him sort through old photos when I heard a knock at the door. Robert was too weak to get up, so I answered it. There they were, all fake smiles and pretend concern. "Hey, Andrew," Rachel said, holding some container of store-bought muffins like she was trying to bribe her way in. I didn't buy it for a second. But Robert was always gracious, even when he knew people had ulterior motives. He invited them in. For the next half hour, they put on their best act. "Robert, you're looking great," Marcus lied. "Is there anything you need? Anything at all?" Rachel added, laying it on thick. Robert just smiled politely. "I'm fine, but thank you for stopping by." Then Marcus, who couldn't help himself, said, "We were just talking about the cabin the other day. It's such a beautiful property. Have you thought about what's going to happen to it?" Robert gave him this sharp look. "I have," he said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. That didn't stop them. After they left, Rachel sent me a text. "Robert's really starting to decline. We need to start planning for what's next. Let's meet soon to discuss." Discuss what? She didn't care about Robert's health. She just wanted to know how much she could get. The entitlement hit its peak when Daniel posted in the family group chat, "Does anyone know if Robert has a financial advisor? We should make sure his estate is being managed properly." I almost threw my phone across the room. They weren't even pretending to care anymore. Robert was just a pile of assets to them. They couldn't wait to divvy him up. That night I told Robert about their antics. He just laughed and shook his head. "Let them talk," he said. "They'll get what they deserve soon enough." I didn't know what he meant then, but I'd find out soon. Robert passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning, with just me and his dog bear by his side. He'd been fading for days. I think he knew it was time. His last words to me were, "Don't let them ruin what's yours." That stuck with me. Robert spent his final months making sure his legacy would go to someone who cared, someone who would honor it, not squander it like the rest of them would. As much as I was grieving, I didn't have the luxury of wallowing. The will reading was scheduled for the following week, and I was not looking forward to it. My family had been circling like vultures for months. Now the feast was finally here, or so they thought. On the day of the will reading, I showed up early, mostly to mentally prepare. Robert's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. "You ready for this?" he asked. "Not really," I admitted. He chuckled. "Well, just remember, Robert made his decisions very clear. There's no room for debate." That was comforting, but I knew my family well enough to expect fireworks. One by one, they trickled in. Marcus came first, dressed like he was closing some big business deal, expensive watch, smug grin. "Morning, Andrew," he said, like we were best buddies. Rachel and Christopher arrived next. Rachel was already in full drama mode. "This is going to be so hard," she said, clutching Christopher's arm like she was about to faint. Daniel showed up last, looking bored and annoyed, like this was some meeting he'd been forced to attend. "Let's just get this over with," he said, plopping down in a chair. My parents were there too, sitting in the corner like royalty overseeing their court. Mom gave me a tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach her eyes. Dad didn't even acknowledge me. Once everyone was seated, Mr. Thompson started reading the will. He began with smaller items: Robert's collection of fishing gear, some antique hunting rifles, a few personal mementos. Then came the big news. "To my great-nephew Andrew, I leave my hunting cabin and the surrounding 85 acres of land, along with $200,000 to renovate and maintain the property." You could have heard a pin drop. Marcus broke the silence first. "What?" he said, his voice rising. "That can't be right. Robert wouldn't just give all that to Andrew." Mr. Thompson didn't even look up. "It's what's written here in the will. Mr. Warren, shall I continue?" Rachel was already in tears. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "What about my kids? Robert always said he wanted to support the next generation. How are we supposed to carry on his legacy without the cabin?" "Your kids aren't even born yet, Rachel," I couldn't help myself. "Maybe focus on having them first before you start claiming Robert's legacy." That earned me a death glare, but before she could respond, Daniel jumped in. "This has to be fake," he said. "Robert was smart. He wouldn't leave all his assets to one person. There must be another version of the will." Mr. Thompson calmly pulled out a second folder. "This is the most recent and legally binding version, signed and notarized. If you'd like, I can walk you through the process Robert took to ensure there would be no confusion." Daniel shut up real quick. Then came the real shock. For the rest of Robert's estate, he'd made it crystal clear. Everything else was to be liquidated. His investments, savings, all other assets, all going to charities he cared about. Wildlife conservation, veteran support organizations. The room erupted in chaos. "What the hell is this?" Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Rachel was openly sobbing now, with Christopher awkwardly patting her shoulder like he didn't know what else to do. "He must have been pressured," Rachel wailed. "Andrew must have convinced him to do this." Mom finally spoke up, her voice dripping with anger. "What did you do, Andrew? Did you manipulate Robert into this? There's no way he would have left us out unless you put ideas in his head." I stayed calm, even though my blood was boiling. "I didn't manipulate anyone. Robert made his choices because he knew you didn't care about him. You cared about his money. That's why you're all so mad right now." That hit a nerve. Marcus stood up and towered over me, like he thought he could intimidate me. "You don't deserve this," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You didn't even care about Robert until there was something in it for you." I couldn't help but laugh. That's rich coming from the guy who couldn't even visit Robert once in the past year. Don't talk to me about who cared. The rest of the reading was a blur of angry outbursts and passive-aggressive comments. By the time it was over, I was exhausted but oddly satisfied. They could scream and cry all they wanted. It wouldn't change the fact that Robert's decisions were final. As we were leaving, Mom cornered me near the door. "You've torn this family apart," she hissed. "If you had any decency, you'd share the inheritance. Robert would want you to." I looked her straight in the eye. "If Robert wanted that, he would have written it in the will." "But he didn't, did he?" She stormed off without another word. My family didn't just want the cabin for sentimental reasons. There was a financial motive driving their desperation. What none of them openly admitted was that the cabin's land had serious potential. Over the years, the area around Robert's property had become a prime location for upscale vacation homes and fancy resorts. Developers were already approaching nearby landowners, offering huge money to buy acreage for new projects. The 85 acres Robert left me was one of the largest untouched parcels in the region. It had stunning views, access to a private creek, and was close to a growing tourist town. Word had spread in the community that the land could fetch upwards of $2.5 million if sold to the right buyer. Marcus, Rachel, and Daniel weren't just seeing a cabin, they were seeing dollar signs. I knew this was only the beginning of their schemes and tantrums, but I was ready for whatever came next. Robert had trusted me to carry on his legacy, and I wasn't about to let him down. For the next few weeks, I was bombarded with calls, texts, and emails from every single one of them. It didn't matter how many times I said no. They were relentless. The first incident happened at the cabin itself. I came home from work one day to find my doorbell camera blinking with notifications. I checked the footage, and there they were, Mom, Rachel, and Marcus, standing on my porch, trying to get inside. Mom was peeking through windows while Rachel tugged at the doorknob. Marcus, always the opportunist, was inspecting the side door like he was planning to break in. "Don't touch anything," Mom said sharply in the video. "We don't want him to sue." I couldn't believe it. They actually drove out to the cabin while I wasn't home. What were they thinking they could do? Claim squatters' rights? Steal something? I called Mom immediately. "What the hell were you doing at my house?" She didn't even try denying it. "We were just looking around," she said, like that made it okay. "Robert's cabin is part of the family, Andrew. You don't have the right to keep us out." "It's not part of the family," I retorted. "It's mine, and if you set foot on my property again, I'll call the cops." "Andrew," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Don't be like this. We're just trying to do what's best for everyone. You're being unreasonable." "No," I said firmly. "I'm honoring Robert's wishes. You're the ones being unreasonable." That night, I installed new locks on every door, set up additional cameras around the property, and put up no trespassing signs at the edge of the driveway, just in case they tried their luck again. But they didn't stop. Rachel sent an email the next day, begging me to sell the cabin to her for $150,000. Less than a quarter of its value. "Please, Andrew," she wrote. "This cabin means everything to me and Christopher. We'll pay you more than it's worth. You don't even need it." I didn't even bother responding. Marcus's next move was to spread rumors about me to the neighbors. I found out from one of Robert's old friends, Mr. Davidson, who lives down the road. Marcus has been telling people you tricked Robert into leaving you the cabin, he told me. Don't worry, I set him straight, but you should know they're trying to turn people against you. His plan didn't work, though. Robert's neighbors knew the truth. They'd seen how often I was there, taking care of him. Marcus and Rachel hadn't set foot on the property in years. Daniel took a different approach, one that involved more scheming and less crying. About 2 weeks after the will reading, I got a call from Mr. Thompson, Robert's lawyer. Andrew, he said, his voice serious. We've got a bit of a situation. Your brother Daniel submitted what he claims is a revised version of Robert's will. I froze in place. What? Don't worry, Mr. Thompson said quickly. It's an obvious forgery. Robert's signature doesn't match, and the notary stamp is fake. I've already filed a report with the authorities. I couldn't believe it. Daniel actually went to the trouble of faking an entire new will, one that conveniently split Robert's estate evenly among all of us. I called him immediately. What the hell is wrong with you, Daniel? He didn't even try denying it. I was just correcting an injustice, he said smugly. Robert would have wanted family to share everything. You don't deserve to keep it all to yourself. Robert made his wishes clear, I snapped back. You're just mad they didn't include you. It's not fair, he shouted. You manipulated him, Andrew. Admit it. I hung up before I said something I'd really regret. The next day, Daniel learned what happens when you try to tamper with legal documents. Mr. Thompson followed through on his promise. Daniel was officially under investigation for forgery. Apparently, when you fake a will, it's not just frowned upon, it's a felony. I got a call from the investigator on the case asking if I'd cooperate. Absolutely, I said without hesitation. If Daniel wanted to play stupid games, he could win some serious consequences. A few days later, Daniel called me, his voice shaking with panic. Andrew, you have to help me! I almost laughed. Help you? Are you serious right now? The police showed up at my house, he shouted. They're saying I committed fraud. This is insane. You need to tell them it's a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, I said coldly. You forged a will, Daniel. That's a crime. What did you think was going to happen? You can't do this to me, he yelled. We're family! Funny how you only care about family when it's convenient for you, I replied. Good luck explaining your injustice theory to the judge. Things escalated quickly after that. Daniel was charged with forgery and fraud. He had to hire an expensive lawyer and tried downplaying the situation at first, claiming it was just a family dispute. But the evidence was damning. The fake will was laughably bad. Robert's signature looked traced, the notary stamp was printed off the internet, and even the dates didn't match up. It was a complete amateur job, and the authorities saw right through it. During the investigation, they found emails Daniel had sent to a shady online service offering to create fake documents. One email even said, "Can you make this look convincing enough to fool a lawyer?" That alone sealed his fate. At the preliminary hearing, Daniel looked like a shell of his former self. Gone was the smug tech bro who thought he could outsmart me. When the prosecutor laid out the evidence, Daniel's lawyer tried arguing it was all a misunderstanding, that Daniel was just trying to clarify Robert's wishes. The judge wasn't buying it. You don't clarify a will by forging signatures and faking legal documents, the judge said bluntly. Daniel eventually took a plea deal to avoid jail time, but it came at a steep price. He got slapped with a $75,000 fine, had to pay restitution for the legal fees I incurred, and was required to complete 500 hours of community service. On top of that, his reputation was in shambles. Word got out about the case, and his startup lost major investors. The rest of the family tried rallying around Daniel, blaming me for taking things too far. Did you really have to involve the police, Andrew? Mom asked during one of her guilt-tripping calls. Daniel is your brother, and he's lucky he didn't end up in prison, I said firmly. He was just trying to fix things, she insisted. No, I snapped back. He was trying to steal from me. Stop making excuses for him. They didn't like that answer, but I didn't care. By the time it was all over, Daniel was a broken man. He tried rebuilding his business, but his reputation was so tarnished that most clients moved on. He even had the nerve to ask me for financial help, claiming he needed just a little support to get back on his feet. Not happening, I told him. You can figure it out on your own, just like I've been doing my entire life. He hung up on me. I haven't heard from him since. Watching Daniel face real consequences was oddly satisfying. For once, the golden boy of the family couldn't weasel his way out of trouble. He'd always acted like he could do whatever he wanted without facing repercussions, but not this time. By this point, I was done playing nice. I filed a police report for the attempted break-in and let my family know in no uncertain terms that I was done entertaining their nonsense. Don't contact me again unless it's through a lawyer, I told them. Mom called me a selfish traitor. Rachel cried about how I was tearing the family apart. Marcus accused me of ruining Robert's legacy. And Daniel, he threatened to sue me, even though his forgery attempt had already backfired spectacularly. Through it all, I stayed calm. You should have respected him while he was alive if you wanted to be part of it, I said every time. By the end of the month, I had completely cut them off. Their numbers were blocked, the cabin was fully secured, and I let them scheme all they wanted. They weren't getting a damn thing from me. It's been 6 months now since Robert passed away. I've spent that time renovating the cabin, using the money he left me to honor his memory. I've installed solar panels, updated the plumbing and electrical systems, and added a workshop where I can weld when I'm not guiding hunting trips. It's becoming exactly what Robert wanted it to be, a place where I can build my future. Despite my family's predictions that I'd fail, the cabin is thriving. I've preserved most of the land as a wildlife sanctuary, just like Robert would have wanted. The renovations have made the place more comfortable without compromising its character. Every beam and board still tells a story of Robert's life, and now mine too. My family? They've mostly given up. The last I heard, Daniel's startup finally folded. Marcus had to close one of his gyms due to financial troubles. Rachel and Christopher postponed their plans for children. Apparently, they're having marital issues. And my parents, they've retreated to their social circles, probably spinning some tale about their ungrateful son. I don't miss them. The peace I found at Robert's cabin, my cabin now, is worth more than their validation ever was. Some days, sitting on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains, I swear I can feel Robert's presence, approving of what I've done with the place. Sometimes I wonder if they've learned anything from all this. Probably not. People like them rarely do. They'll continue chasing status and money, never understanding what truly matters: loyalty, respect, and genuine care for others. As for me, I've found my place. In this cabin, on this land, I'm not the black sheep or the disappointment. I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. And that's something my family, with all their money and status, will never understand. Robert knew what he was doing when he left this place to me. He wasn't just giving me property. He was giving me a future free from their judgment. A place where I could be myself without having to explain or apologize for it. Don't let them take what's yours, he told me. I haven't, and I never will.